Welcome to another edition of the Apostasy Report. My name is Joshua. If you love tradition, especially Southern Baptist tradition, this is likely going to offend you. But if you love truth, especially the truth found in God's Word, you will be grateful for the unpleasant information you're about to see. A lot to cover. Since we're talking about the Southern Baptist Convention, perhaps we should start with a quote from a fellow Baptist. An English Baptist, but a Baptist nonetheless. I'm talking about Charles Spurgeon, who said this: "The day will come when those who believe they can repair a house which has no foundation will see the wisdom of quitting it altogether." That is exactly my contention. We are going to take a look at the foundationless house that has become the Southern Baptist Convention. A house might be good and orderly when you purchase it, but if that house has undergone a fire, you have about as good a chance of repairing that home as you do unscrambling an egg. And basically what we're looking at in the Southern Baptist Convention is a scrambled egg. And it can't be unscrambled. So let's jump right into it. The Southern Baptist Convention is an interesting organization. Well over 150 years old at this point. That is classed as the largest denomination in North America. It boasts some 15 million members, and I think over 50,000 cooperative churches. While it's a denomination, it doesn't exercise hierarchical structure in the way that, say, the Catholic Church does. So they're real big on local church autonomy. Nevertheless, it is a denomination, and you have to qualify to participate. So let's just let's get our bearings a little bit. Maybe we can zoom in on this somewhat. The statement here says that the convention chooses to recognize those churches it deems as supportive of the convention and in harmony with the convention's theological, missiological, and ministry purposes and work. So while it is not hierarchical per se, even though there is a president and so forth, they don't dictate what local churches can do concerning their budget or a hiring of people and so forth. But it does say that the convention chooses to recognize churches that it deems as supportive of the convention and so forth. So you have to qualify. Existing churches that choose to cooperate with the SBC that do not already have 501c3 tax-exempt status are granted coverage under the SBC umbrella once they are recognized by one of our cooperating Baptist state conventions, or they submit a letter to the SBC Executive Committee affirming the church is in friendly cooperation with the SBC and establish a track record of financial contributions to SBC causes. That's really what they mean by friendly cooperation. Are you giving the SBC money? So as you can see, they list out some benefits. Here's the benefits to cooperating with the SBC. You cooperate. Well, you know what? Let's watch this first.
The Southern Baptist Convention is not a church. It is a network of autonomous, self-governing, self-supporting churches. At its most basic level, the Southern Baptist Convention is an annual gathering of representatives from cooperating churches who have organized a specific set of cooperating ministries with a defined set of ministry assignments, annually elect trustees to govern those ministry entities, and adopt a budget to help fund those entities through a cooperative giving model called the Cooperative Program. Currently, the SBC has an executive committee, an auxiliary, the Women's Missionary Union, and 11 ministry entities: International Mission Board, North American Mission Board, 6 seminaries, Guidestone, LifeWay, and the Ethics and Religious Liberty Commission.
Let's stop right there. So the SBC is not a church. However, it is a recognized denomination. I think around 1845 it became a denomination, maybe 1846. Nevertheless, it is not a church per se, but it is a collective of cooperating churches, and by cooperating, we mean churches that fund the greater mission, which is, of course, framed as gospel-centered missions and getting the message of Christ out. These entities you see before you here, if you can see those, perhaps I'll zoom in a little bit. I don't know if that made any difference whatsoever, but as you can see, they have four organizations or boards: International Missions Board, the SBC Committee, a women's union. They have 6 seminaries, and then these 3 other branches. The ERLC is pretty well recognized in the political sphere. That's their main branch, Ethics and Religious Liberty. And that is led by Russell Moore. And then also LifeWay Christian Resources. We'll come back to that, but bear in mind that these 11 points, so to speak, are what make up the Southern Baptist Convention. These are all of their various branches. And so LifeWay Christian Resources is not merely some Christian resource distribution, but it is an official branch of the Southern Baptist Convention. Here we have Tom Rainer's top 500 SBC churches. We're going to take a look at 1, 2, 3, and 5 for now. Well, we got New Spring Community Church right here. We have Saddleback Valley Community Church. That name might ring a bell for some of you. We'll get to that in a bit. Second Baptist Church right here, and we've got Prestonwood Baptist Church. Just a few names of some of the larger, more prominent voices and churches in the Southern Baptist Convention. We're going to begin with Second Baptist Church in Houston, Texas, led by Ed Young. Let's take a look.
It is indeed Father's Day. Ed Young, Fellowship Church. Tell us what we're about.
Yeah, I'm the real Ed Young. Did you know that? No, I'm kidding. Dad's name is Homer Edwin Young. That's the H. And thankfully, he did not name me Homer. Isn't that awesome? My name is Edwin Barry Young. Some people inadvertently call me Ed Young Jr. Our son is the real Ed Young Jr. But anyway, it is great to be back home at Second Baptist Houston, one of the greatest churches on the planet. Wow. But also, what's so cool about this, Dad, is we're merging our 2 churches, all of our campuses, all of our environments. So right now, we're seeing live in real time at Fellowship Church. We're based out of Dallas, Fort Worth. Let's give it up for Fellowship Church. Now, we have multiple locations.
That's about good. Now, you're listening to Ed Young, and the man that passed off the microphone was Ed Young. This is father and son right here, in case you'd missed that somehow. So Ed Young, Sr., the big Ed Young, is the lead pastor here of Second Baptist Church in Houston. And this is his degenerate son, Ed Young, who is the leader and founder of what's known as C3 Church. It's a church growth scheme, basically. This is precisely the model and the guy that inspired Stephen Furtick to create the sideshow carnival circus church that he has. Well, he learned from this guy here, Ed Young. We could do an entire session on just Ed Young, but just for frame of reference, so you see that this father promotes the ministry of his degenerate son, Ed. This is who Ed Young is. This is who Ed Young has been.
I believe as long as we're alive, we have potential that's not been released, that there's gifts and talents in all of us, and that's what I appreciate about you and Lisa and the whole gang up there in Dallas. The way y'all just inspire people to be who God has created them to be and to reach their full potential.
Well, Joel, we love you and appreciate you and Victoria and this great church. And, man, thank you for letting me show up here.
Thank you.
And attempt to be like Joel. But see, I can't be Joel.
That's
and
right.
You can't be me.
That's
I
right.
can't be Bishop or Brian Houston or
right.
Tommy Barnett. You have to be who you are. And once you just said it, once you are, man, that is when we hit on all cylinders.
That's what you're anointed. That's where.
That's right. We heard from Joel right here. It's in you. Amen. That's awesome, Joel.
So these two court jesters really love each other, and they really hate the truth. If you're not familiar with Joel Osteen, I almost envy you. But he's a Category 1 false teacher. He is something of the poster child of false teachers and easy believism and self-help style messages. Well, that's who Ed Young is, right? So one of the largest and most prominent voices in the SBC, certainly in terms of numbers, their Second Baptist Church, is Ed Young, the father, who promotes the ministry of his laughably degenerate son, Ed Young. Ed Young does things like this.
Welcome to C3 Conference! He stands 6 feet 10 inches tall! He's from Death Valley! The one and the only, The Undertaker! This is the highlight of my ministry.
I don't know if you caught that. He said, "This is the highlight of my ministry," as he introduces a professional wrestler to this church, this C3 conference, where they learn all kinds of clever church growth schemes. He says this is the highlight of his ministry. Enough said. Ed the father should be, there's no problem with loving his degenerate son. But the fact that he promotes his ministry, that's the problem. You can love your sinful son and implore him to repent. But that's not what Ed, one of the leading voices in the Southern Baptist Convention, does. No, he promotes the ministry of this degenerate. So that's how we're kicking things off. Greg Laurie, for those of you not familiar, please watch the Calvary Chapel Apostasy Report. I did a couple months ago, I think it was. Greg Laurie is featured extensively in there for a fuller treatment on just how ridiculous Greg Laurie has become. Please watch that. He is a regular on TBN now, but here he is with Hillsong's Brian Houston, the founder of Hillsong Church, the man that covered up his father Frank Houston's pedophilia, the man that says Christians and Muslims serve the same God. This is the heretic Brian Houston. Hillsong Church, pretty much synonymous with carnival acts and big mega church laser light shows and so forth. So Greg Laurie is friendly with Brian Houston, as well as TBN and so forth. Like I said, please, if you need more information on Greg Laurie, go watch that. Well, here's an announcement from Greg Laurie a couple years back.
And a huge partner in this was the SBC, the Southern Baptist Convention. They assisted us in so many ways, and I become great friends with many SBC pastors over the years, people you know well that we have here, like Jack Graham, James McDonald, James Merritt, David Jeremiah, the list goes on. And what I love about SBC folks is that they have a great passion for evangelism. In fact, the SBC is the largest Protestant denomination in America today. There are 15 million people that identify as Southern Baptists, and they have 45,000 churches. And so as we've partnered together, we've begun to talk about some things that we might do together that need to really be done in America today. And so this is my official announcement that Harvest is now partnering with the Southern Baptist Convention, and we're joining that family.
So Greg Laurie and his Harvest Church joined the family of the Southern Baptist Convention, which, as we've already kind of detailed, is something like a fraternity. You basically pay money to have friends. That's the best way I could class the Southern Baptist Convention. They allow you to be autonomous and do your own thing, but you can't be a member unless you're donating, as a cooperative church. So they discuss things that they might want to do together. Well, this is kind of a scratch our back, we'll scratch yours sort of thing. The SBC has been in decline for several years. There are multiple articles about this over the last several years. Baptisms declining, membership declining, and so forth. Right about this time, or shortly thereafter, shortly before this, he mentions James MacDonald, the newly disgraced and former pastor of Harvest Bible Chapel, who was raking it in to the tune of, I think, $2.5 million a year, and had a gambling problem and a bullying problem, and you can read all about that extra. Greg Laurie mentions James MacDonald. Well, right about the time James MacDonald came in and Greg Laurie came in, the Southern Baptist Convention was looking for ways to boost their numbers or offset this apparent decline. So some of Greg's friends apparently convinced him to join the Southern Baptist Convention, and he lists a few of them, Jack Graham being one, pretty famous guy out there in Dallas, Texas. Jack Graham is a longtime friend of Greg Laurie's. You can see them traveling to the White House together and going on tours and things like this. Well, Jack Graham, kind of a staple in the SBC. He's the pastor of Prestonwood Baptist Church, which I believe was number 5 on our list that we looked at initially. Who is Jack Graham? Tell me who your friends are. I'll tell you who you are. Here we go. This is at Stephen Furtick's church at his infamous Code Orange revival right about the year 2012. And T.D. Jakes taken the stage, who Stephen Furtick, in his words, said is the greatest preacher of our time. Here's T.D. Jakes in his own words.
And I wanted to come, but I also had to come because Jack Graham called me and said, Bishop Jakes, there's a young man over in Charlotte that just really wants you to come. And you can't live in Dallas and say no to Jack. So I said, I better get on up there and see what's going on. I'm delighted to be here tonight.
Can't live in Dallas and say no to Jack. Jack's got influence. Jack's got sway. Jack doesn't have any biblical sense, that's for sure. But T.D. Jakes is, again, maybe second to Joel Osteen as something of a poster child of what is known as prosperity heresy. This is a multi-millionaire profiteer and charlatan who's friends with Oprah, who was at the very best ambiguous about his beliefs on the Trinity and more likely a modalist who claims to have retracted some of those things. Well, James MacDonald, who started a lot of this with his infamous Elephant Room debacle, parts 1 and 2, welcomed T.D. Jakes in part 2 and said he was a brother. So T.D. Jakes certainly wasn't clear about his Trinitarian views there, but nevertheless, even if he asserted the Trinity dogmatically, the man is still a heretic. He's still a prosperity preacher who should not be heeded for a moment, but should be warned of. This is a wolf in sheep's clothing, so to speak. Well, Jack Graham is not only friends with Stephen Furtick, who is something of a protege of T.D. Jakes. In his own words, he says, if you attend this church, whether you know it or not, T.D. Jakes is the man that feeds your soul every week. That's how influenced by T.D. Jakes Stephen Furtick is. If you know anything about Stephen Furtick, that makes absolute sense to you. Well, Jack Graham is bridging the gap between these two. He knows Stephen. He likes Stephen. He knows T.D. Jakes. They're friends. Well, let's hear from Jack Graham himself in case there was any doubt whatsoever.
I can't wait to get home. We're on our way home right now. I'm sorry I can't be there with my good friend James Robinson and T.D. Jakes, Richie Rush. These are all friends of mine. And,
These are all friends of mine. T.D. Jakes is a friend of his. Here's Jack Graham on Daystar TV, Heresy Network. His program is featured there on Sunday evenings, I think. Actually, Sunday morning now. You'll find everyone from Joyce Meyer to T.D. Jakes to Hillsong to You'll find Reinhard Bonnke on here. You'll find Joseph Prince. If you can think of someone who teaches heresy, you'll find him on Daystar TV. And there's Jack Graham, who also has a program on Daystar. But he says very plainly, these men are all my friends. T.D. Jakes is my friend. One of the leading and more prominent voices in the Southern Baptist Convention is a friend and promoter of heretic and prosperity preacher T.D. Jakes. Let's continue. Jack Graham also, here we go, here's the article title, former SBC president. Jack Graham was president from 2002 to 2004, I believe it was, of the SBC. So he's no longer the president, but of such a high status that he was the president for a couple of years. Former SBC President Jack Graham praises chairman who killed bill to outlaw abortion. He praised this man as courageous. And here's the man. He says, my pastor and friend Jack Graham, pastor of Prestonwood and former SBC Baptist president, is strongly in support of my position. Leach, chairman of the House Committee on Judiciary and Civil Jurisprudence, wrote in a response to a social media post on Thursday. And so you can see Jack Graham says here, I support Leach for Texas 1,000%. Jack Graham's about as good at math as he is at discernment. He is a caring and courageous congressman who is leading Texas citizens with grace and truth. This congressman opposed House Bill, I think it's 896. It's probably listed in here somewhere. But anyway, this bill basically was going to criminalize abortion. And he said that was wrong. It would have given babies the same protection as the mother. And so any mother who aborted her baby would face criminal prosecution. Jack Graham praises a man who said, nope, I can't support that. So even by just purely secular conservative standards, Jack Graham doesn't even have good conservative values if he weren't, taking upon himself the title of Christian. This is the Southern Baptist Convention. The picture is going to grow more vivid by the second. Southern Baptist Convention darling has been a longtime speaker and partner in all things Southern. Beth Moore. Maybe you've heard of Beth Moore. Very popular in the women's circuit. Her Bible teachings are popular in every dime a dozen cookie-cutter megachurch. Here's Beth Moore's tweet. A double dose of church this weekend. Jones and I are going tonight to Lakewood. That's where Joel Osteen is the pastor. We're going to Lakewood to worship and to hear Christine Kane and be with her darling girls. So Christine Kane, the Hillsong-styled pastrix, who is also a huge fan and lauds T.D. Jakes and so forth, was preaching with Joel Osteen at Lakewood Church, and Beth Moore and Christine Kane are best friends, or at least very good friends. This is Beth Moore. Beth Moore is part of the Southern Baptist Convention. She speaks at ERLC events, as you're going to soon see. And Beth Moore is entrenched in some of the grossest spiritual misconduct around, just in general. Beth Moore partners with Hillsong. There she is at Hillsong 2017. You got Beth Moore up here. John Gray, this is a former associate pastor of Joel Osteen's who left to start his own heretical megachurch. You got Craig Groeschel down here. Of course, Brian and Bobby Houston. There's Carl Lentz. You can just barely see him here. Gentes and Franklin and others. The point is, Beth Moore is steeped into the worst movements in so-called Christendom. This is Beth Moore with Hillsong. She regularly tours with their Hillsong Color Conference. This is their women's conference. Here's a little clip.
Color Conference is a global sisterhood who champion the feminine heart and all her beauty and brilliance.
Be part of the room as we step into the color experience.
This week on Color Conference Mainstage, renowned Bible teacher Beth Moore.
He wants to deliver you to a Savior, the Lord Jesus Christ. He wants to deliver you to a life that bears much fruit. He wants to deliver you to a destiny that was foreordained before He said, let there be light.
Color Conference Mainstage on the Hill.
So as you notice, they say it's a it's a sisterhood that champions the feminine heart, and they might as well just go ahead and say it. It's a feminist branch of Hillsong. It's just a gathering of Jezebels. That'd be a better and more apt name for this conference. That's what Beth Moore is. She is part of the Hillsong lineup. She's friends with Christi and Kane. She fancies herself at Joel Osteen's church when she can. And she pretty famously or infamously, oh boy, did I just move the spot here. Here's Beth Moore leading Lectio Divina at Passion Conference with Louis Giglio, the Pope Kisser, in 2012.
Him at his right hand in the heaven, and he put all things under his feet, and gave him his head over all things to the church, which is his body, the fullness of him who fills all in all. Without any comment, please, let's pause and be still and ask Jesus to speak his word to us.
Because it's not written in that Bible right in front of you. Francis Chan, new NAR recruit, friend of Mike Bickle and IHOP and so forth. Since this is kind of creepy, I'm going to go ahead and stop it there. This is them practicing some form of Catholic contemplative prayer, something known as Lectio Divina. Let's pause and ask Jesus to speak his word to us while they sit there and wait for something to come, something that's not in their Bible. This is bizarre, to say the least. You had Lecrae here. You had John Piper here. You had Louis Giglio, of course, the founder of the Passion Conference, and Beth Moore, who has been strongly influenced by Brother Lawrence, a Catholic monk who practiced many of these same oddities himself. This is who Beth Moore is. Beth Moore, Southern Baptist Convention lady. Here's Beth Moore with her two good friends, Joyce Meyer and Christine Kane.
I often think, okay, have me that one bird dog I love so much. Have that thing waiting for me in my condo. So we don't know the answer, but we can sure hope.
Wait, you're wanting to live in a condo?
I'm having a mansion. That's what I said.
Okay, but the Greek word that translates mansion in the King James Version.
Oh, come on now.
I'm sorry, y'all. I'm sorry.
Now you're going to go Greek on me?
I'm sorry to be disappointing.
Welcome to my Baptist friend. She's having a condo, I'm having a mansion. That's all I'm saying.
Amen.
And there comes the prosperity out of this trifecta of heretics. Now they're of course talking about the mansions that await us in heaven and so forth. But you can have the abundance of the heart, the mouth speaks. I'm waiting for a mansion, right? These women are the epitome of the spirit of Jezebel. Their husbands are the epitome of the spirit of Ahab. They are running amok, teaching rank heresy to everyone left and right. Joyce Meyer's been doing this for a long time. You can't tell because she's had so much plastic surgery and dyes her hair that she looks like a different person. She's got to be close to 80 at this point. But anyway, that's who Beth Moore is. These are her friends and ministry partners. She has been deemed in good standing in her church, and is part of the Southern Baptist Convention. So much so, right? This is who Beth Moore, Joel Osteen supporting Beth Moore. Joyce Meyer and Christine Kane supporting Beth Moore. Hillsong speaker, Beth Moore. Well, she is good friends with another Moore, Russell Moore. Russell Moore is the leader of the Ethics and Religious Liberties Commission, one of the core branches of the Southern Baptist Convention. Let's turn the volume up there. So let's hear what Mr. Moore has to say to Mrs. Moore. No relation. Pay attention.
I am so excited to have you here, Beth. I've been looking
so
forward
happy,
to this
Russ.
for a long, long time. And I want to say, even before we get started, just a word of sort of personal privilege. There was a time in my life when I was going through a really, really dark time and really reevaluating whether or not I even wanted to be in ministry. And Beth Moore,
let me just say, I wish he had decided to quit.
Through text message, would teach, encourage, in so many ways. I would not be in ministry today if not for Beth Moore. And so I am really, really grateful to have you here with us today.
We can add that to the list of grievances we have against Beth Moore. If it weren't for Beth Moore, perhaps Russell Moore would have done the world a favor by quitting ministry. This man is a plague and a cancer to all things associated with Christendom. But Beth Moore is who encouraged him and taught him and coaxed him to get back on the ministry train. And no wonder. You can see who's influenced him by his actions. So if Beth Moore's that bad, we shouldn't expect Russell Moore to be any better. Again, this is a core leader of the Southern Baptist Convention and the head of one of their core outlets, the Ethics and Religious Liberties Commission. CNN wrote an entire article praising Russell Moore. Why? Because that's the caliber of Russell Moore. If CNN says it's good, you should probably worry. The survival of a Southern Baptist who dared to oppose Trump. So they go on to talk about how brave Russell Moore was and standing up to Donald Trump and so on and so forth. Russell Moore defends building mosque to SBC critics. Now again, the Ethics and Religious Liberties Commission is a very political, decidedly political, overtly political, definitely more political than biblical organization and core branch of the Southern Baptist Convention. The idea of supporting religious liberty for everyone so that your specific religious cause is not infringed upon makes sense to a degree, right? If you champion free speech, for example, but you start stipulating it, it's a matter of time before those stipulations will fall back on you. So the safer option is to say, free speech for everybody is a better idea. Even if I don't like what they say, at least I know I have the right to say what I want to say. Well, there's a difference between acknowledging that in principle and then going to bat for somebody. Well, I can say I agree with free speech. I'm not going to be fighting on behalf of somebody who's saying outlandish things. While I can understand that the general that free speech should apply, I don't have to be specific about things. I don't have to say this man should be able to say this specific thing. Well, Russell Moore took it a step further and just really went to town to help build a mosque. Really went to bat for this Islamic organization to help them build a mosque. So this is who Russell Moore is. He's been described by some as a political operative, and I don't find that to be a wanting description. In fact, it's probably an understatement. Russell Moore is a uniter, not a divider. Those are bobbleheads. I guess he had somebody make a bobblehead of himself. That's him in the middle. Pope John Paul II on the far left. I believe that's John Paul. Doesn't matter. And then Martin Luther on the right. A uniter, not a divider. Of course, this is posted on October 31st or Reformation Day. Obviously, the symbolism here is that Russell Moore is happy to bridge the gap between the Protestants and the Catholics. This is an ecumenical man who is a key leader in the Southern Baptist Convention. He's a uniter, not a divider. Here's Russell Moore.
There was a time when we could assume that people understood what we meant when we said marriage and family and
Do you notice the priest standing behind him there?
sexuality. Now we have to articulate what we mean, and I think we have to embody.
Now he's saying we. Russell Moore is at the Vatican. This is an event called Humana. He attended with Rick Warren and N.T. Wright in 2014 to stand up for family and marriage and so forth, right? Something where there seems to be some point of agreement with the Catholics, right? There's a crossover. Well, we both agree to this end. And then he starts using the terminology of we, right? Showing that he is one with them in some sense. Well, Russell Moore is a uniter of error with error and a divider of truth, which makes him a heretic. That's who Russell Moore is. Here's Russell Moore on the Catholic Network. Listen.
Dr. Moore, you are a leader within the largest Protestant denomination in the nation. Here we are in the Global Catholic Network.
Yeah.
Can you speak to the powerful relationship and opportunities there are for evangelicals and Catholics to work together to advance the cause of life?
Well, I'm the product of evangelicals and Catholics working together, literally, since my mother's side of the family is Catholic, my father's side of the family is evangelical, and so I sort of grew up in a majority Catholic area as an evangelical, seeing the best and the worst of both, And I think that one of the things that we've seen in the pro-life movement is not only Catholics and evangelicals working together, but often in local communities, seeing the unique strengths and giftings of both actually helping the other.
Look how he tries to balance and equate the two. Well, I've seen the best and worst of both, right? In other words, listen, it's not that we're any better than Catholics. I've seen the best and worst of both. And we need to look at the unique strengths and giftings of both, which was clearly some kind of nod to the Catholics. This is a man who has a social agenda. So much has been said about this man. There are reams of articles written about his political agenda in the social justice movement. Racial, gosh, I think we're going to play a clip from one of his, the ERLC has as an event that was put on a couple months ago called Evangelicals for Life. And while the main theme is supposed to be abortion, right, Evangelicals for Life, what they conveniently and sneakily did was they brought in a whole bunch of people to talk about immigration and equate the problem of abortion with the problem of immigration. And in other words, evangelicals, if we're supporting babies, we should also be supporting refugees at the Mexican border and so forth, right? This is pretty clearly a political agenda. This man is, in my opinion, not a Christian, not even kind of. That is a key leader in the Southern Baptist Convention, a uniter with Catholicism, not a divider. Russell Moore is going to be speaking at the Pastors Conference. This is the SBC Pastors Conference this year, along with David Platt, a good friend of NAR's Francis Chan, New Apostolic Reformation. Francis Chan is his good friend. Well, these two have also been good friends of guys like Rick Warren for years. Here's a brief clip.
So, Rick, is there a difference between the idea of the freedom of worship and the freedom of religion?
Russell Moore.
Oh, yeah, well, absolutely.
David Platt.
In fact, this is a subtlety that we're seeing the government say.
Now, this is an ERLC. This is on their own YouTube channel. And, of course, this is David Platt, Russell Moore, and Rick Warren partnering together at this Q&A session here. The Hobby Lobby and the Future of Religious Liberty. All right, the fact that they felt the need to have Rick Warren there would be enough to discredit them all by itself. Never mind that, Russell Moore took a trip with him to the Vatican because they're both pretty friendly with Catholicism. Here's Rick Warren in his own words about what he thinks about Catholics and Catholicism.
We have far more in common than what divides us. When you talk about Pentecostals, charismatics, evangelicals, fundamentalists, Catholics, Methodist, Baptist, Presbyterian, on and on and on. Well, they would all say, we believe in the Trinity, we believe in the Bible, we believe in the resurrection, we believe salvation is through Jesus Christ. These are the big issues. Sometimes Protestants think that Catholics worship Mary like she's another God, but that's not exactly Catholic doctrine. There's the understanding, and people say, well, what are the saints all about? Why are you praying to the saints? And when you understand what they mean by what they're saying, there's a whole lot more commonality. Now, there's still real differences, no doubt about that. But the most important thing is, if you love Jesus, we're on the same team.
That's his big conclusion. If you love Jesus, we're on the same team. Apparently, he hasn't read his Bible before. He doesn't understand the concept of a false Christ or a false Jesus, which is exactly what we're talking about here, right? He just lumps Catholicism in as another denomination. Yeah, we have some differences, but they believe the same things. we would all agree with the Trinity and the resurrection, and that salvation is by faith. And, well, perhaps Mr. Warren should pick up a Catholic catechism, because there's a whole lot of stipulations while they do believe in a resurrection and they do believe in the Trinity. Those aren't the issues that we're concerned with. Primarily, it's the false gospel that they teach, namely that salvation is not by faith alone, in Christ alone. There are sacraments you have to observe. It is a works-based religion that is steeped in mysticism and all kinds of nonsense, from transubstantiation to the necromancy to the deification of Mary. Well, it's not exactly Catholic dogma. Yes, it is. Right? The sinless perfection of Mary. I mean, time would fail us to list all of the atrocious beliefs of Catholicism. So for Rick Warren to say that, there's much more that we have in common, we should focus on what unites us, not what divides us. He is an ecumenical deceiver operating in the spirit of an antichrist. That's who Rick Warren is. And Russell Moore and David Platt invited Rick Warren to join them on their ERLC panel. What else does Rick Warren have to say about the Pope?
Authenticity, humility. Pope Francis is the perfect example of this. He is doing everything right. You see, people will listen to what we say if they like what they see. And as our new Pope, he was very, very symbolic in, his first Mass with people of AIDS, his kissing of the disformed man, his loving the children, this authenticity, this humility, the caring for the poor. This is what the whole world expects us Christians to do.
Us Christians.
And when they go, oh, that's what a Christian does. In fact, there was a headline here in Orange County, and I loved the headline. I saved it. It said, "If you love Pope Francis, you'll love Jesus."
that was the headline?
That was the headline. Oh. It was a headline. I saved it. I showed it to a group of priests I was speaking.
If you love Pope Francis, you'll love Jesus, a man who was pretty unanimously through the stream of orthodoxy for the last several hundred years, pretty unanimously, people agreed that the Pope and or the papacy was the seat of the Antichrist, if not, or an Antichrist, if not the Antichrist. Rick Warren says he's doing everything right. He says he's our new Pope. He calls him with the phrase "us Christians." And if you love Pope Francis, you'll love Jesus. This is a man who has ascribed to himself the moniker of Holy Father. Perhaps not a more blasphemous title around than that. A man who allows people to bow down before him and kiss him and call him Holy Father. Very clearly why many people deduce that the Pope or the papacy was some form of an antichrist is this man very clearly exalts himself above all that is called God. Sitting in the seat of God, making himself out to be God. The vicar of Christ. This is the ecumenical and apostate deception of Rick Warren. Rick Warren here at the Hillsong Conference a couple years back. Just notice his phony acting. It's shockingly bad. But here you go.
It's an honor to be here with you. And really, I don't feel like preaching. I just feel like worshiping. As I walked around and looked at your faces, I thought, this is going to be like heaven.
Very dramatic. Anyway, that's him at the Hillsong Conference with a whole host of other heretics. But he says, I looked at your faces, and he does this everywhere he goes. This is what heaven's going to be like. And he makes these jokes, all of it in an attempt to mask the very abysmal theology that's about to come out of his mouth. Well, that's who Rick Warren is. Rick Warren was invited by the Southern Baptist Convention just a few years back to speak at their pastors' conference. Rick Warren, Francis Chan, and the newly disgraced James MacDonald. So you have a gambling addict and multimillionaire salary extortioner over here. You got Francis Chan, who's part of the New Apostolic Reformation now. He's on tour with Heidi Baker and Bill Johnson and Mike Bickle, etc., Lou Engle, that whole crew. And you got Rick Warren, the ecumenical Pope lover. That's what the Southern Baptist Convention is. That's what they do now. Whatever they might have done in the past is irrelevant. Right now, this egg is scrambled, and you're not unscrambling it. Rick Warren, Francis Chan, James McDonald invited to the Southern Baptist Convention Pastors Conference. Here's another clip of Rick Warren at this Catholic World Meeting of Families.
Good morning. Your Eminences, Your Excellencies, brothers and sisters in Christ, I want to thank first Pope Francis and Archbishop Chaput for inviting me to this great convention congress. I want to thank Cardinal O'Malley for allowing me to share the stage with him. It's a big honor to do that in this last session.
Big honor.
I want to thank you. Thank you for caring about the family. Thank you for caring about the family enough to be here. Have I told you lately that I love you? Last November, Pope Francis invited me to be the closing speaker at his conference on the family at the Vatican. And at that conference, Pope...
Doesn't matter what happened at that conference. Really, Rick Warren is gushing over his newfound embrace by the Catholic Church. It's a great honor for him to be there with the Cardinal O'Malley, brothers and sisters, eminences, excellencies. I want to thank Pope Francis. This man is an ecumenical deceiver. Rick Warren, most people know this, but in case you didn't, there's Rick Warren with Elton John, right? Supporting, fighting for AIDS together. Right? This is a man who's waffled on whether or not he supports gay marriage. And this is the kind of stuff Rick Warren does because he's not a Christian. He's a wolf in sheep's clothing, and it's evident. Well, here's another leading member of the Southern Baptist Convention, Al Mohler with Rick Warren. Well, why are they together? Well, if you'll recall from the very first slide I showed you, Saddleback Church is number 2 on that list. Yes, that's right. Rick Warren is a member of the Southern Baptist Convention. Rick Warren, Elton John loving, Pope loving, Rick Warren, Hillsong participating and loving. If you love Pope Francis, you'll love Jesus. That Rick Warren, he's a member of the Southern Baptist Convention. Here's Al Mohler. Rick Warren says, thanks for bringing the Southern Baptist Theological Seminary executive team to visit. I enjoyed our time. You can't see it here, but Al Mohler retweeted this at the time. This was a few years back. Al Mohler, the president of the Southern Baptist Theological Seminary and one of the leading voices in the Southern Baptist Convention, is a friend of Rick Warren. Why shouldn't he be? They're both part of the same convention. That is what the Southern Baptist Convention is. Here's some remarks from the very politically minded Al Mohler, who is right behind Russell Moore in his political operative stance. Here's a curious statement from Al Mohler.
Now, early in this controversy, I felt it quite necessary in order to make clear the gospel to deny anything like a sexual orientation. And speaking at an event for the National Association of Evangelicals 20-something years ago, I made that point. I repent of that. I believe that a biblical theological understanding, a robust biblical theology would point to us that human sexual affective profiles, who we are sexually, is far more deeply rooted than just the will, if that were so easy.
So now Al Mohler denies sexual orientation. He had to repent of that. I thought there was orientation. Now, now he's blurring the lines. Now he's making these political statements. So many of them. I couldn't possibly cover all of Al Mohler's folly in the last couple of years now, but he's one of the primary elements of this new wave of social justice within the church, and people in the Reform camp don't really know what to do. Even at the Shepherds Conference recently, Al Mohler got a little feisty on stage because he didn't like questions that were being asked to him because he is not in support of these declarations against social justice. No, he's all about race baiting. He's all about blurring the lines of sexuality. Al Mohler is a deceiver. at one time seemed to be a reasonable conservative voice. Al Mohler has an agenda. Here's Al Mohler. He's got something else in common with Rick Warren.
Are there Christians in the Roman Catholic Church? Are there true believers in the Roman Catholic Church? And in that sense, I have to answer, yes, I believe there are probably millions of believers within the Roman Catholic Church. Millions. And then you'd say, well, then what do they believe? Well, they believe the gospel of Jesus Christ. In other words, the Bible says that salvation comes to those, and let's just go back to Romans chapter 10, because it's such a I think, an appropriate and instinctively right place to go.
Okay. If you confess with your mouth and believe with your heart the Lord Jesus and, believe God raised him from the dead, you shall be saved. So what he's going to make an argument here is that Catholics have believed the gospel, just like we have, probably millions, he says. So Al Mohler is either an ignorant man or a deceptive man. I'm going with deceptive here. The statement it just defies logic, because the mutually exclusive tenets of Catholicism and Orthodox Christianity preclude the possibility of somebody becoming a true Christian and remaining in Catholicism. People get saved out of Catholicism. They don't get saved and stay there. Are there millions of saved Mormons as well? Are there millions of saved Jehovah's Witnesses? How far do we want to take this? If there are millions of saved Catholics, that phrase just wouldn't be applicable. There may be many millions of saved former Catholics. That's a better way to put it. Anybody who becomes saved while a Catholic, God will not allow them to stay there. The Holy Spirit will not allow them to stay steeped in a mystic false religion that is permeated with damnable heresy. The Holy Spirit will not allow it. So if somebody does become saved within the Catholic Church, and I've no doubt there are plenty testimonies to that end, very shortly after, you will see an exodus. They won't stay there. They can't stay there. If the Spirit of God lives in them, they cannot stay there. Biblical truth precludes it. It's not compatible with biblical Christianity. You cannot stay where God's truth is not wanted. But Al Mohler says, there's probably millions of Catholics saved. Well, they wouldn't be Catholic then. You can't believe in sacraments and the gospel. Those are two different gospels. That's Al Mohler. What do we have here? Newly elected president of the SBC executive team, I believe. Let's take a listen.
I want to take this opportunity to invite you to join me in Birmingham, Alabama on June the 11th and 12th for the 162nd session of the Southern Baptist Convention's annual meeting. I'm Ronnie Floyd, the new president and CEO of the Southern Baptist Convention's Executive Committee, in gospel partnership with over 3,246
All right. Ronnie Floyd, also former president of the SBC. For a couple years. Boy, I thought this was a Just for Men commercial when I first saw it. Ronnie Floyd is the newly elected president of the executive committee, the SBC executive committee. I think it was just announced a couple of days ago that he resigned from his church so that his son could take over the throne in classic nepotistic fashion. Probably a lot more that could be said about that, but that's how it goes. It's these things turn into family businesses at some point. So his son's waiting in line to take it over. Greg Laurie's son, Jonathan, is waiting in the wings there at the Harvest Church, and so it goes. All right. If there's a child, usually they're second in command, ready to take over. But Ronnie Floyd is the new former president and new president of the whole convention and new president of the executive committee. Which is a pretty high rank in the Southern Baptist Convention. Needless to say, he is one of the leading voices still in the Southern Baptist Convention. A couple years back, Ronnie Floyd found himself at the International House of Prayer. For those unfamiliar, goes by the acronym IHOP, led by Mike Bickle of the infamous Kansas City False Prophets. Heavily signs and wonders oriented. These people are I'm steeped in some of the most aberrant heresy available today. If you watch some of their sessions, you'll see people convulsing while they're trying to give testimonies. Quite frankly, the whole thing looks to be a demonically possessed, just a sea of chaos, and what appears to be some form of demonic possession. Most people are familiar with IHOP. If you're not, look them up. They are heretics through and through. And here's Ronnie Floyd linking up with them.
I'm not here tonight to highlight our theological differences, but to bend my knee next to yours and to ask God to have mercy on America.
I'm not here to highlight theological differences. I'm here to bend my knee with yours. He goes on to say, listen, we have some theological differences. I'm not necessarily endorsing everything. I don't think you're necessarily endorsing everything with me, but my being here is proof that times are crucial and we have to come together and pray. Pray with who? Pray with what? With false teachers? Brilliant, Ronnie. Mike Bickle's been friends with Bill Johnson in Redding, California, and that whole crew for years. Jesus Culture is tied up with this group. Again, I mean, just hours and hours of video exist on the folly of IHOP. But here he is at the One Thing Conference, right? This is one of the branches of what's known as the New Apostolic Reformation. There's Ronnie Floyd, former president of the SBC and current president of their executive committee. That is the Southern Baptist Convention. Ronnie Floyd, a few years back, also found himself at this pagan-looking thing called The Gathering, a solemn assembly, a national solemn assembly. There's Ronnie Floyd here on the right. You got Robert Morris, who gave Glenn Beck the stamp of approval as a Christian, an avowed Mormon, said he's a brother, and him and Tony Evans were really pouring into his life and so forth. But that's another story. So it says that there many more are going to be there. There's just them on the front page here. Big prayer meeting they had. Catholic bishops were in attendance. That's the discretion or lack thereof of Ronnie Floyd. Ronnie Floyd is a man who lacks discretion and a man who lacks truth. And that is indicative of the Southern Baptist Convention. LifeWay. As we know, LifeWay is one of the core branches, is a staple of the Southern Baptist Convention. It's not just some random Christian distribution center, resource center, or whatever. This is part of the Southern Baptist Convention. This is operated by the Southern Baptist Convention. So let's take a look at some of the resources the Southern Baptist Convention is passing out. Rick Warren's Bible study methods, if you can see that. Try to zoom in a little bit here. You got another Rick Warren book, Rick Warren, the Son of God. All of these are Rick Warren's. There's Rick Warren's Daniel Plan, The Purpose-Driven Life, The Purpose-Driven Church, 40 Days of Community, The Study Guide, Purpose-Driven, Everything is Possible with God, all kinds of Rick Warren resources. And no wonder Rick Warren is a part of the Southern Baptist Convention. That alone, that one fact alone, that ecumenical Pope-loving man, the fact that Rick Warren is allowed to be a part of the Southern Baptist Convention is alone enough reason to vacate it altogether. That alone discredits the entire leadership of the Southern Baptist Convention. Whoever's allowing Rick Warren to stay in there, that alone disqualifies them. But it's not just Rick Warren. It's Jack Graham. It's Greg Laurie. It's Beth Moore. We'll keep going. LifeWay. What else does LifeWay distribute? That's right, Hillsong. That's what the Southern Baptist Convention. Don't think of this as LifeWay. Think of this as the SBC. That's what it is. The ERLC, the Ethics and Religious Liberties Commission, is not just some independent thing. It is operated by the Southern Baptist Convention. What they do, the Southern Baptist Convention does, and what LifeWay distributes, the SBC distributes, because LifeWay is the SBC. Hillsong, the Modern Worship Series, Hillsong, 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 there you go. Cornerstone CD, Hillsong, this is all their music, Hillsong United, Youth Revival, but it's not, look at Let Hope Rise, the movie soundtrack, Let Hope Rise, the DVD, the whole Hillsong documentary. featuring Carl Lentz extensively. This is what the Southern Baptist Convention is distributing to the youth. Hillsong Live at Hillsong Conference. There you go. Really? You thought the Southern Baptist Convention was full of conservative guys in ties and suits who talked with a Southern accent and ate biscuits and gravy after Sunday service, right? And they would never. They don't even like dancing, let alone this sort of stuff, right? Wrong. The Southern Baptist Convention promotes and sells Hillsong merchandise. That alone, if Rick Warren didn't exist, this alone would be enough to disqualify whoever's making these decisions. And you who support them by your cooperation with your funds. But let's continue. If it couldn't get any worse, what is this? Oh, come to the altar, only king forever. I know you can't read the writing there. I'll try to zoom in a little bit. Do you know who this is? Mighty Cross. These are songs. I know you can't see the names on here, but it'll make sense in a second. Who's that? Stephen Furtick. Crash the Chatterbox. Stephen Furtick. Unqualified. Yeah, that's right. Not only Stephen Furtick books and resources. Stephen Furtick. Greater. Stephen Furtick. 7 Mile Miracle. Stephen Furtick. Sun Stand Still. All of these, Stephen Furtick wants to be a rock star, so he's created a little group where they make worship songs now. And so all of these are lyrics that Stephen Furtick helped compile. There's a whole section devoted to Stephen Furtick. The new wave, prosperity-driven charlatan and profiteer Stephen Furtick. That is the Southern Baptist Convention. That's what they're promoting. Let's continue. Stephen Furtick, Rick Warren, Hillsong. That's what the SBC promotes and sells. That's what they're giving out. This isn't truth. This is heresy. Talk about a scrambled egg. Student events. All right, student events page. Let's just take a quick look at the Youth Pastor Summit. Click on this link. Speakers and artists. Who do we got here? This is an SBC, LifeWay sponsored event. KB, artist and speaker. Okay, there's all these different people. I'll just tell you right here off the top. Erwin McManus, this guy's a Hillsong speaker. He's going to be at, I believe he's going to be at Hillsong this year. That's Erwin McManus. What did we have? We had another, the Lift Tour. What's the Lift Tour? Again, the SBC is promoting this. What kind of garbage do we have over here? Here's some of the people that we got here. DJ Morph, who's an artist. DJ Vow, a DJ artist. Jared Hall, the illusionist. Ooh. Fidel, hip-hop and rap artist. Social Club Misfits, hip-hop duo. KB the rapper. Lakeshore Worship. Worship leaders. Another worship band. Worship leaders. This guy's a speaker, illusionist, and pastor. Well, that's fitting. I dare say most of these pastors are illusionists. This whole thing is a magic show. It's an act. You're not seeing what you think you're seeing. If you could see the spirit behind them, you'd run for your life. This is devilish. And that's not just wrong, it's devilish. This is what LifeWay and the Southern Baptist Convention are promoting. For your children, for your parents, for anybody that you might love. Stephen Furtick, Hillsong, Rick Warren. Well, isn't that brilliant? What do we have here? What do we have here? Elevation. Why are they selling Stephen Furtick? Oh, that's right. Because Stephen Furtick is also a member of the Southern Baptist Convention. They're not just selling his books. That would be bad enough. But no, he's been admitted into the Southern Baptist Convention. This is the Southern Baptist Convention's own website. As you can see, this is the church search feature. Matthews, North Carolina, Elevation. That's Stephen Furtick's church. It's only on here because they are, in fact, members of the Southern Baptist Convention. So you got Rick Warren, you've got Stephen Furtick, you've got Greg Laurie, you've got Beth Moore, The Southern Baptist Convention's taking anybody, anyone who will give them money. You give us enough money, we'll scratch your back too. We'll look the other way. Most people don't know Stephen Furtick's part of the Southern Baptist Convention. It's called Elevation Church. It doesn't say it's a Southern Baptist church. It doesn't have to. Greg Laurie's church is called Harvest. It's a Harvest church. James McDonald's was called Harvest Bible Chapel. It wasn't called a Southern Baptist church. Stephen Furtick, a member of the Southern Baptist Convention. How do you like them apples? Wow. Well, let's hear what the current president of the Southern Baptist Convention, named J.D. Greer, let's hear what he has to say about Stephen Furtick.
Without exaggeration, I will tell you that I have never met anyone personally, and maybe some more out there, but I've never met one personally that has a greater endowment of the spiritual gift of faith than my friend, Pastor Stephen Furtick. God has given him a vision for the city of Charlotte, a vision that has helped form our vision that we have for our city, and a vision that challenges me every time that I get near him. Elevation Church started in February of 2000.
He has never seen anyone with a greater endowment of the gift of faith than his friend, Stephen Furtick. J.D. Greer is a dangerous man. This is the current president of the Southern Baptist Convention, growing in influence, unfortunately, for the world. Here are some rather peculiar statements from Mr. Greer, the new president of the Southern Baptist Convention. We'll start with this one.
In fact, let me say something here that I fear might get misunderstood, but I feel like it's important enough that even though it might get misunderstood, I'm going to say it anyway. In this sense, you can almost think of homosexuality as an affliction and not just a sinful choice. Because for most gay people, they feel like they didn't choose those desires. In fact, here's what I've learned after 2 decades of pastoring. Almost every person I've encountered, in the church at least, almost every person who struggles with a same-sex attraction is almost always dealing first and foremost with an unanswered prayer. God, why didn't you change this when I asked you to?
Now homosexuality is not a sinful choice, it's an affliction. They've been afflicted. This is the president, the current president of the Southern Baptist Convention, saying, I fear that this might be misunderstood. No, we understood it loud and clear, Mr. Greer. Now, he'll say that doesn't justify homosexual living, but this whole message is downplaying the severity of homosexuality. The whole time, and I hate when people do this in general. They'll always qualify something in the Bible that they have a feeling might be offensive and say, well, yeah, it's sinful, but so is burglary, so is pride. Why do you need to throw that in? It's thrown in as a means of taking the weight off of the first thing that was just said. Yeah, well, yes, homosexuality is sinful, but so is heterosexual promiscuity. Yeah, that goes without saying, but you're only doing that as a diversion from what was just said. You're trying to cushion the blow of that. And when you go on about cushioning blows, it says you don't take seriously the first thing you said. You're more interested in not offending someone. You're more interested in unwittingly offending God. But let's listen to some more comments from this derelict president of the Southern Baptist Convention.
Jen Wilkin, who's one of our favorite Bible teachers here and who's actually leading our women's conference, she said we ought to whisper about what the Bible whispers about, and we ought to shout about what it shouts about. And the Bible appears more to whisper when it comes to sexual sin compared to its shouts about materialism and religious pride. Throughout Jesus' ministry and his life.
Did you get that? Jen Wilkin, the feminist, we'll point out in a second, told him we ought to whisper about what the Bible whispers about and shout what it shouts about. And then he goes on to say the Bible pretty much whispers about sexual sin, but it shouts about materialism. That's what we should be focusing on. No, I'd say it shouts about both. If it's in there, it's worthy of being said. Romans chapter 1 is by no means a short chapter. You have nothing like Romans chapter 1 anywhere in the Bible about materialism. Not a treatment that extensive. Is Romans 1 not a shout decrying sexually deviant behavior? Are you kidding me? Is this man unlearned and untrained in the word, or is he just a liar? I'm going with liar here. J.D. Greer is a liar. He's a deceiver, and he's every bit the political operative Russell Moore is. And no wonder. These guys are pals. They're cohorts. And let's get another statement from him.
You'll stop being a judgmental, pharisaical dispenser of the law, and you'll suddenly become a gospel witness. And your life will no longer be characterized by judgmentalism and fundamentalism. It'll be characterized by compassion. You'll start loving your neighbor like somebody made in the image of God and feeling compassion for them and their weakness. You will begin to treat them first and foremost like people who deserve compassion, not scorn or judgment or a political voting bloc that we need to marginalize. When you understand that, then what that means is that you become a person who will, for example, stand up and be among the fiercest advocates for the preservation of the dignity and the rights of LGBT people. Because we recognize that gay and lesbian people are essentially just like us, people made in the image of God like us and deserving of all the dignity and respect that we desire for us or our children. There is no them.
Wow. Acknowledging that everyone is a sinner and everyone is in need of God's mercy is not the same as becoming a fierce advocate of their lifestyle. You will become, he says, among the fiercest advocates for the preservation and the dignity of the LGBTQ community. Fiercest advocates? What are you, high? You got to be kidding me here. This is the president of the Southern Baptist Convention saying he's getting his advice from Jen Wilkin. Jen Wilkin, here you go. There's Jen Wilkin down here on the left-hand side with Christine Caine, the Joyce Meyer loving heretic on the right-hand side. That's who Jen Wilkin is. 6 of one, half dozen of the other. None of these women have husbands that are around. Abundance. It's an abundance of Jezebels is what you have there. By the way, this is another LifeWay sponsored conference. This is a Southern Baptist Convention conference. And who did they invite? Christine Caine, Hillsong Pastrix extraordinaire, and Jen Wilkin, who says we should whisper about things. She's gone on to giving whole messages about not saying women should be pastors per se, but really trying to elevate the leadership of women in the church. She said everything but women should be pastors. She wants them to have more prominent leadership roles. This woman is a feminist. That's where J.D. Greer gets his theological advice from. Jen Wilkin, we should whisper about what the Bible whispers about. Where'd you come up with these nonsense of theologically bankrupt anecdotes? Rick Warren, did he tell you these? This is baffling. It's baffling how bad it is. This is the current president of the Southern Baptist Convention, saying you should be a fierce advocate among the fiercest advocates of the preservation and dignity of the LGBT community or whatever. Why doesn't that apply to anybody else? How about the fiercest advocates of murderers? What about the child molesting community? J.D. Greer, would that include them too? Should I be a fierce advocate for people who molest children? Which we're going to get to in a second. Huh. Very interesting. Jen Wilkin, partner of Christine Caine and All Things Nonsense. Here's a little more political talk from J.D. Greer and I forget this guy's name, but listen to what they say. This is an ERLC sponsored event. You can see this is on ERLC.com. This is Southern Baptist event.
We recognize that in a church like ours that is predominantly majority culture.
Majority culture.
Those first few.
Majority culture. He doesn't want to say the word white.
Brothers and sisters of color that came in. There was a lot of. I'm only now beginning to realize how much they gave up in order to become a part of that. And they were brave. They were champions in it, and they very patiently put up with a lot of, I think, just ignorance and a lot of missteps on our part. And you've been doing that not just in a local church. You've been doing that in the Southern Baptist Convention as a whole. And when nobody else was talking about it, it was just you.
Right.
And so I'm very grateful for you.
Well, yeah, you know, that you're talking about, it's that time where as minorities we go in and, you know, and you're in a predominantly Anglo space and you walk in and you just like, you see the other minority, you give them that nod. And you're like, all right, we're going to do this. Yeah, you know, and you jump in. But I mean,
you see, it sounds funny, but it's not. Both of these guys are clowns. This is absolute buffoonery. What you're hearing from J.D. Greer is a quintessential white guilt diatribe. Sorry, I'm white. So, listen, how do you keep racism alive? You keep talking about it. You keep talking about race. I'm only citing this anecdotally. I don't think the man is a believer by any stretch. But Morgan Freeman, prominent African-American actor, was doing an interview one time. And the interviewer said, was asking him questions about Black History Month. And Morgan Freeman said something to the effect of, I don't want Black History Month. He said, well, why not? He said, you can't relegate the history of my people to a month. He said, do you want White History Month? And the guy goes, well, I'm Jewish. He goes, okay, do you want Jewish History Month? And he goes, no. He goes, well, neither do I. He goes, well, what about, how are we going to deal with racial issues in the country? And he goes, you stop referring to me as a black man, and I'll stop referring to you as a white man, and we just have a conversation. That's how racism dies. Not creating problems that don't legitimately exist. But that's the nature of the Southern Baptist Convention now. It's politics. It's political stances. It's hard leftist politics infiltrating in Christian masquerade. That's what these guys are all about these days. All of their messages have something at the ERLC event. You got immigration. You got racism. You got LGBT. All of this. This is political leftist rhetoric coming out of the mouths of some of the most prominent voices in the Southern Baptist Convention, including their own president. Mind-blowing. And if all that weren't enough, this despicable article, the article itself is not despicable in the fact that they wrote it. The content is unfortunate and despicable. Houston Chronicle, pretty famously, released this. 20 years, 700 victims. Southern Baptist sexual abuse spreads as leaders resist reforms. I believe the number I saw in here was over 300, 320, 380. There it is. 380 Southern Baptist church leaders and volunteers have faced allegations of sexual misconduct. 380. Never did you think you were going to see a rival for the sexual deviancy found in the Roman Catholic Church, but here it is. Here it is. Matt Chandler and the Village Church are members of the Southern Baptist Convention as well. This guy here, facing child molestation charges, this is a former minister at Matt Chandler's church. 35 years old, facing 20 years in prison. Former staffer at SBC megachurch charged with child sex crime. That's what's going on in the SBC these days. If all of this wasn't enough, on a most basic level, that even a hardened atheist would be disgusted by, is this. How do these things happen? This is an epidemic. You're not looking at a couple of problem people. 380 sex abuse charges? Staggering. absolutely staggering. How does it happen? Lack of oversight, lack of commitment. There's at least some form of understanding. At least you can look at the Catholic Church and say, well, gee, this forced celibacy really seems to be playing a role here. That makes sense. But when you see just how cavalier the leadership in the Southern Baptist Convention is with their own doctrines, with their own theology, with their own spoken convictions, when you see that they're hollow promises, they're hollow statements, there's no integrity in action. If they're not willing to uphold very basic principles of biblical Christianity in not partnering with apostates and heretics, is it any big wonder that they don't take anything seriously? Is it any big wonder that there's sexual deviancy? This is probably the tip of the iceberg. 20 years, 380 sex abuse charges, 700 victims in the Southern Baptist Convention. It breeds superficiality. Any organization, any leaders, or any leaders, singular, or leaders, plural, who welcomes in, especially a Christian organization, let's rephrase this, any Christian organization that permits into its rank and file those who proliferate apostasy, false teaching, heretical views, or promote those who do overtly, are people that are not worth submitting to, not only not worth submitting to, but should you stay aligned with them, you become one and the same with them. Now, what about those people that might have started good and slowly, became bad? Maybe when Beth Moore was first in the SBC, she wasn't touring with Joyce Meyer. The moment that video clip dropped, Beth Moore should have been dropped from the SBC. Not only has that not happened, her stock has only risen in the Southern Baptist Convention. The leadership itself is corrupt. The leadership itself permits the proliferation of apostasy. The leadership itself, there's no repairing this. And should you willingly decide to submit to this leadership and fund them, giving them money, just so you can maintain the title and denominational affiliation of Southern Baptist Convention, you're aiding and abetting their apostasy. This is not a joke. From Rick Warren to Stephen Furtick to Hillsong to Jen Wilkin to J.D. Greer himself to Ronnie Floyd to Jack Graham, friend of T.D. Jakes, all of it. The leadership itself is corrupted. The people that they welcome in, even if they're not in leadership, corrupted. This is a scrambled egg that cannot be unscrambled. And if all that weren't enough, sex abuse charges on such a staggering level, it's just hard to comprehend. This is what we're dealing with. The Southern Baptist Convention has crumbled. That house is on fire, and there's no putting it back together again. If you continue to stay aligned with the Southern Baptist Convention after all of this, you yourself are aiding and abetting apostasy. These people are selling Stephen Furtick's materials. They're selling Hillsong's materials. They're selling the purpose-driven life. Rick Warren is a member of the Southern Baptist Convention. Beth Moore cohorts with Joyce Meyer as a member and the person that got Russell Moore back into ministry. Russell Moore himself fancies himself a uniter, not a divider. At the Vatican, on Catholic TV, making political statements left and right. This is the tip of the iceberg. Each one of these people I mentioned could be a whole episode. It may come to that. What you're seeing is a house that is well on fire, that is consumed. And the Southern Baptist Convention is, in fact, steeped in apostasy. Those leading it are leading people astray. And if you follow them, you are following them off a cliff. This is serious. 15 million members of the Southern Baptist Convention. If you continue to stay aligned with this, if your church is a Southern Baptist church, convention church, and they continue to stay cooperative with them, paying them monthly, giving them monthly benefits, donations, and so forth, you are helping to spread deception and apostasy yourself. My advice, get out. Get out of that church. That church, if that church doesn't get out of the Southern Baptist Convention, you get out of it. The day will come when those who think they can repair a house which has no foundations will see the wisdom of quitting it altogether. Heed the words of a Baptist from yesteryear and quit it altogether. Until next time, God bless and Godspeed.